Today on the show, we explore the most caring, compassionate, murderous, protective, loving, sociopathic father, Joel. Welcome to Lore Party, the podcast that explores the stories, characters, and universes of our favorite video games. I'm Lawrence.
And my name's Leo.
And Leo.
Yeah.
We're finally at what should be one of our favorite episodes.
The big boy. The big man.
We basically have been ranting about this in every single episode, whether or not it's actually made it past post-production.
We got feedback on a past episode that was basically, you talk too much about Joel. And it's like, well, you know what? Screw you.
Make a fucking episode about
We're going to make a fucking episode. So yeah, on today's episode, we are diving deep into the world of Joel. On the last episode, we discussed David fantastically, and we had such a blast. It was so much fun. Listen to the episode if you haven't already. And really, honestly, I was a little bit surprised during that conversation about how similar he feels in many ways to Joel. And then on the second episode of this series, we took a close look at Ellie, and sort of this episode's going to be similar to that in how we explore who Joel is and what we think about him. Which, you know, if we were playing like Super Mario Brothers, is a pretty clear conversation. It's like, yeah, Mario's the hero. It's great. But this is a little different. It's just a little different.
When you said Super Mario Brothers, I instantly thought that David would definitely be Luigi.
Oh my God. What a Twilight Zone version of the video game. He looks like Luigi. Wears a green jacket, right?
Sometimes blue.
Sometimes blue, depending on. Okay, let's start off. How I want to frame this conversation. We can talk a little bit about Joel's timeline, right? Like the early life of Joel, pre Last of Us. We can talk a little bit about Last of Us. At the end, we'll talk a little bit about what we know about his future. After the timeline of Last of Us, maybe we'll discuss his psychoprofile, right? Like who he is, what kind of person is he? And then we'll share some final thoughts. It'll be a grand old ball, just a fun party. But to start off, his childhood. Yeah, so Joel was born September 26th, probably around 1984-ish in Texas, and he had his brother Tommy. And we don't really know a ton about his early childhood, but he mentions that he wanted to be a singer when he was younger. Which is hilarious and sweet and nice, because really it's like the last thing in the world I could imagine him doing. But eventually he lived with his daughter, Sarah, in a 2-story home near Austin, Texas. And he was married for a brief time to Sarah's mother, and we don't necessarily know what happened with that. But it seems like he works really long hours as a carpenter or in construction. But he does seem to have kind of a complete life with his daughter. He's got lots of. Did you take time when you were playing the game to like look at their pictures in the house?
I did look at some of the pictures, and like I read the newspaper, mainly because it has clues about what's going on.
Right.
I don't know why I remember them saying something about like him owing someone money or something or whatnot.
No. You're spot on. It's like the conversation he's having on the phone is about like having to keep a contract, and it's just because like, you know, it's a big deal. And in construction, you often don't have like a steady employer. You're an entrepreneur, you have your own business, you are being hired by a client, and if a client is like building a number of buildings, that can be really good consistent work. So he's not like doing super well, but clearly kind of, you know, making ends meet to a degree.
He's basically like a modern day millennial. Shout out to making me feel comfortable.
Oh my God.
This is, we're all Joel a little bit.
We're all a little bit Joel. Just we'll get into that.
A little bit Joel rock and roll.
Dude, we all want to be singers. I know it's true. Um, so I wanted to call out here, especially about the pictures and some other things. But as I was researching this episode, there are some incredible, like non-explicit, non-expositional storytelling in the house that didn't even register like really with me until now. And this is stuff like was it there's building plans laid on his bedside table and several copies of a book called Construction Regionalism. He also has a copy of Everything You Need to Know About Creating a Startup on the table next to his bed,
Oh,
which I'm like, what a great way of showing not telling, right? Or there's a treadmill in their house. Like maybe he's like so many of us and he like buys something like that and then never uses it. But it's it's funny to think about uh how much thought and care went into just the contents of the house, you know? So there's a lot of really good stuff in the house. It's cool to see sort of because in that early gameplay when you're playing as Sarah, you get to literally explore the remnants of Joel's life leading up to, of course, the events of Last of Us. Anything else you want to say about his sort of like pre Last of Us time?
well, one thing is like there is a newspaper
Mm,
that does talk a little bit about what's going on.
yeah.
It does mention something about like the food supply and like some mysterious disease. So it like briefly hints at like, hey, maybe there was something that was introduced into the food supply that was that caused like what eventually became the infection.
All right. So we get to Last of Us because ultimately this is the phone, the newspaper, all of this stuff is technically in the game, and this is the timeline of the game. So in September of 2013, he gets home from work, and that night is really when runners start appearing in Austin. Now, I wanted to point out this moment. Joel like bursts into the house, bloody and panicked, but it's not his blood because if it were, there would be. It's a very different game. Um, and his neighbor bursts in, and he ends up having to kill his neighbor. And when I first saw this, I was like, "Oh, that's such a brutal first introduction for Sarah to this new world, and also for Joel." Because I think he even says like uh, he's like, "Jimmy, like, don't," and he's really like calling the guy by name, like he knows him. He knows he was like checking in on his neighbors when everything went down. But I was on the Last of Us wiki page, and it said like his neighbor burst in, and neighbor was a linked page, and I was like, no, no way, does no, and I clicked on it, Jimmy Cooper. Jimmy Cooper is Joel's neighbor, and he's got a whole page to himself. It doesn't say a lot, but
Hey man,
listen,
hey
R.I.P.
man, Jimmy Cooper is an important person because technically Jimmy Cooper is that first kill.
Well, it's it's true that we know of. That we
Jimmy
know of.
Cooper,
Allegedly, yeah.
yeah, allegedly he's the gateway drug into the
My God,
murderous Joel of The Last of Us. Jimmy Cooper, why did you do this?
some quiet part of Joel was like, I always hated Jimmy Cooper, and
This is what you get for letting your dog poop in my yard.
wow, brutal. So, Jimmy Cooper bursts in, and this is typical of Jimmy Cooper. Oh my God, and he's like, oh, and Joel has to kill him, right? Naturally. So Joel and Sarah flee with Tommy, Joel's brother, and they get separated. And a soldier acting reluctantly, and I don't actually quite get this because this is like clearly the beginning of quarantine zones and like controlling infections. But it's still a little weird to me that like the soldier decided to or was like commanded to kill them.
Well,
Um,
what I think about that is you're talking about like why the military officials were just like taking out people.
yeah.
Um, my guess is because a few things. It was early stage and they did not have enough information on what was actually going to happen to people because remember before When they originally tried to take the back roads out of the town, they got stopped right by the hospital, and all those people burst out of the hospital and were like yanking people out of their cars
Right, right,
and like biting them. So like imagine inside of that hospital over there were medical professionals attempting to treat people who probably had like like fungal growths or like flu like symptoms. These people probably killed them all
right.
and then ran out into the streets. So, like at that point, the military is like, eventually you could turn because like at that point you don't even know like what is the method of infection. It was just like, holy shit, this is going down here. Kill them all, and we'll sort it out later.
Yeah, that's true.
I was gonna say, one thing too that is super symbolic that happens in this moment that uh, kind of resonates through the rest of the game
Yeah,
is when he actually refuses to listen to Joel, and Joel is like, "Hey, stop, we're fine, whatever," and he decides to take the shot. He hits Sarah, and he hits Sarah's watch that she gave Joel as a birthday present. And you can see it has like the two bullet marks in it. And so the watch breaks, but Joel continues to wear the watch through the rest of the game. And like that's such a powerful symbol when you look at it because the time stopped right at that moment. And so did Joel's time.
right. Yeah. Or and again, we will absolutely get into this. I've got a theory about maybe that part of his life restarting at some point, and that being a huge part of his character and his evolution throughout the game. So, between that last playable moment and 2033, which is when the game picks up again in Boston, um, there are some different moments throughout the game that we kind of get some hints about what happens. Joel considers suicide, but and he and Tommy are together during this part, and they kind of team up and they're working together. Um, he considers suicide, but it says he couldn't bring himself to do it, and he found something to live for, but something that like Tommy really really disliked, and it like caused some tension between them. Based on the timeline that I've kind of looked at, that I've read and researched, it seems like Joel and Tommy probably were both part of a hunter pack. Um, and later, Joel and Tommy smuggled themselves into Boston, and that's where Tommy left him to join the Fireflies. And Joel didn't like that, and they had this big old fight, and they were like, "Well, we're never going to see each other again. Goodbye forever." Um, but in Boston now, without his brother, this is where Joel meets Tess, and they start this kind of life of smuggling, and then they meet Ellie. In this timeline between Sarah's passing and Joel and Tommy splitting ways, I feel like we don't see this part of Joel's life, but Joel is clearly a young man who's in a lot of pain, and we think about him as a hunter, and we think about him among this pack of people who are putting traps for tourists and kind of being this violent, despicable person. By the time he meets Tess, I feel like he's aged and he's gotten older. And later on, and we'll talk about relationships in a bit, but later on, when he reunites with Tommy, they're clearly in a different place, both of them. And a lot of this, I think, is just growing up, like getting into their 40s and 50s, that fire of like, I don't know, adventure and rambunctiousness is maybe dimming a little bit. And so he starts being able to treat these interactions with a little bit more. He's still stubborn and kind of an asshole, but he's able to like interact with people as more of a complete person, even if his, heart and soul is still crushed.
Yeah, like it is interesting that you talk about like he's able to approach I guess people like a I guess as more of a complete person. Cuz you even see it at the beginning of the game, and I know we'll get into this in like a second, but like, when they deal with when Tess and Joel deal with Robert, it's actually a part of the game where surprisingly Joel is the person that's like more in control emotionally. Tess is the one who normally flies off the handle and just will shoot someone in the head. where Joel's like, "Hey, you know what? Luck runs out. Let's probably take things easy and like, not be crazy."
Yeah. Hey,
Which
try to be less crazy, all right? It's like, Joel, you killed Jimmy Cooper. Like, you're the craziest of them all.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here, but stick around. We'll be right back.
We interrupt this podcast for a preview for a different podcast. I'm Bruce, a regular contributor to Lore Party. In the unforgiving world of the gods, there is an endless, vicious cycle of fathers killing sons, brothers killing brothers, and sons killing mothers. But Kratos, the ghost of Sparta, looks to end that cycle with his son Atreus, as they journey through the various realms of the Norse pantheon. Tune into our God of War episodes where my co-host Abu and I discuss the latest installment in the God of War series from 2018 and the insightful ways the game creates more depth in a beloved franchise. Just check out our Lore Party feed and search God of War. It should be easy to find. We now continue your regularly scheduled podcast.
So Joel is the protagonist. We play as Joel. We are Joel. We do the things that Joel does. It's great. Except he kills a lot of people. And he lies a lot, but he kills a lot of people. And we spent a decent amount of time, probably too much time, looking into numbers. And it's really staggering. So I want to throw some data your way.
Got the facts and the figures.
We got the facts, and also not only the facts, but also additionally the figures. So it is worth noting that a lot of the uninfected people that Joel kills take kind of first aggressive action towards him, and all of what we're about to say might just be a byproduct of the world. But again, Joel is much better at this stuff than most people. And could he get through some of these situations without killing as many people as he does? I mean, we just talked about the two guys in the basement or the cellar. Like, one of them he didn't have to kill. So
Right.
I think it's worth noting that there are some people he could have spared. Now, there's this Reddit user, and I found the post. The Reddit user is Finriradra on December 21st of 2018, points out that does some fantastic math. So basically, in the Colorado University sequence, it is pointed out that 60%, as many as 60% of the world's population are dead or infected by the end of the first year of this outbreak. So we know that at its, quote, slowest, the disease took 1 year to wipe out 60% of the population. Now, in 2013, there was about 7.2 billion people. So that means that it's about 2.88 billion people within a year. Now, 20 years later, we don't have any new data from the game. The game doesn't say like, oh, and now there's this many people. And, Lawerence, you and I had this great, you said something about the dry climates, right?
Yeah, because we were talking about like ways to kind of figure out how many people are left, and I think one of the things that we discussed was we had to take into consideration that the disease doesn't spread at the same rate, just based off of the decline, but also we don't know. We only get America, a small portion of America,
Right.
but we don't look at like deserts because we know for a fact that these are as a fungal infection, so they need to be in like darker, more like moist climates, which is why you see those real big packs of like runners and clickers and bloaters normally in basements,
Right. And sewers
or
and
like
stuff, right?
yeah, and like those like kind of murky areas. So we don't know if there are like larger pockets of people surviving in these kind of drier climates where these infected wouldn't thrive.
Or super cold climates, right? Like Alaska or Antarctica
Right.
or Greenland. So there's a lot to consider. But all of what we were talking about, this long conversation, was to kind of figure out how many people are left in 2033 or 2034. And this Reddit user basically ballparks it at global population of 100,000 to 10 million. That could be far off. The math in their kind of post seems pretty spot on, based on like quarantine zones and kind of what you expect, how many people were in Boston and then how many people are left. Knowing also, by the way, that quarantine zones are not just everybody who was in that city who survived, it's everybody in the surrounding areas who made it into the city.
Also, taking into account that we don't know how many quarantine zones have failed, but we do know a considerable number have.
Right. Yeah, that's true too. Either because of fireflies or who knows. Literally, so many reasons could be the reason for these things falling apart. Um, and maybe all of the quarantine zones or most of the quarantine zones we've heard of are all of them. Like that's possible. So we get this ballpark of 100,000 to 10 million people, which is a possible global population. Now, the jump that I took was, let's say, hypothetically, because the United States is a pretty diverse geographical place. Let's say that the infection, because it actually did hit other countries, other continents before it hit the United States. Let's say it hit the entire world approximately the same. In 2014, 4% of the global population was here in the United States. So if we look at that, that means that somewhere between 4,000 and 400,000 people remaining in the world are Americans, are here in the United States, or are living in the United States, because I don't think nationality matters as much in this post CBI world. Now we found an article or a Reddit user who put together that there are 565 killable enemies in The Last of Us, which, if you look at the lower estimates of population, is as much as 14% of Americans. Like, and all of this is to say, we understand that Joel is living one day to the next. He's not thinking this big picture. But think about every time you pull the trigger, you're like, there's 0.3% of people gone. Joel can, depending on how you play the game, can kill 251 himself, can kill 251 uninfected humans throughout this game, which it's crazy. That's a
Right.
wild number, considering
Right.
this is post-apocalypse and I think we've all learned from the documentary Game of Thrones that every dead is a member now of the undead, which is not exactly the rules of Last of Us, but still, every person who's dead is no longer someone who can fight against the army of infected CPI. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people who have guns, who have training. He also does kill, as we've pointed out, at least one, but up to 3 like neurosurgeons.
It's insane when you start to look at the numbers. Like 200, what do you say, 256?
Yeah, 251 uninfected humans is the total possible kill count for Joel.
Like without flinching, without any sort of negative effect. Joel definitely sleeps at different points in this game.
On like an uncomfortable couch too, not even
Right, like Joel he could sleep on like a bed of rocks and some like broken bottles and just be like, yeah, I slept like a baby, and then I'm gonna go kill like 15 more people today. And like the funny thing about it is when he kills all those people, and it's just like without a thought. But the thing that he finds most ridiculous is like Ellie being like saying that quote from that comic book after they killed people. It's like to the end of the universe and beyond, something something for survival, and he was just like, huh.
back to mass murder. It's great.
Right, and then before that, it's like, I mean, this guy has one hell of a post-apocalyptic resume, because you think about it. We go to questionable hunter time,
Right.
to smuggler,
Yeah.
to just like death-bringing demon man traveling through the world with this like little kid trying to get her to this hospital.
Yeah, plague of frogs sent by God. otherwise
Oh
known
my
as
god, yeah,
Joel.
just taking out everything, and then you just can't kill the man to save your life. It's insane. And like I know that we're talking about killing a lot, but we also we brought up killing and lying. I think is lying fits well into this section because not to be too much of a shrink, but I feel like Joel, the biggest lie is the lie that Joel tells to himself
Oh
that
my
everything
God.
is okay.
Holy shit.
Oh my god! But like in all seriousness, Joel lies to himself. I mean, Joel lies to everyone like a bastard. Like that dude will look you right in the face and tell you a stone cold lie, like the sky is green. But he is lying. I think he's lying to himself. I mean, he's like, it's okay. This is how life is. You just move on.
Right.
Like Joel lies to himself so constantly that it's easy to lie to everybody else because like it's just like whatever.
Like we tell the lies we have to get to tomorrow.
Yeah, and that is Joel 100%.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that about wraps it up. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please take a second to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us grow the show. And be sure to connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at lore_party. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Fuck Jimmy Cooper. Am I right? What a piece of shit.
Oh shit. Oh god, this is going to be such an interesting edit. Oh, it's so fucking long. God
He
damn
was
it.
he literally Jimmy Cooper one time he was backing out of his like like a driveway, right? And I watched his truck scuff my fence, talked to him about it, said it didn't happen. So I'm glad he's dead. He deserved it. Anyway. All right, I'm stopping recording.
Me too.